for the sake of all beings, wisdom, compassion, and non-clinging awareness. So tonight I'm going to continue on with the theme of the 7 factors of awakening, focusing on the 7th factor of equanimity. I think probably most of you have more of a natural understanding of the first 6 factors. You've all been practicing mindfulness in your own ways for quite a long time, informal practice, and even being mindful of your mind states or your behaviors. Not necessarily your shoes out in the rain, but general mindfulness. The factor of curiosity or investigation is one that you're very familiar with in other ways in your life, your hobbies, your work life, things you become passionate about or interested in reading about or studying. So the idea of applying investigation or curiosity, I think, is very familiar to most of us as well. This idea of energy or focus or diligence or determination, again, you apply that in many other areas of your life, personal and professional, hobby and sport. So that one makes quite a lot of sense to us, I think. Mindfulness, investigation or curiosity, effort or determination, and bringing some pleasure or interest or joy to what you're doing, I think that feels pretty familiar as well. As does then turning towards some of the calming factors of peacefulness or tranquility. Yeah, you have experience of that in your meditation and in your life at times. And concentration, when you're working, when you're writing something, when you're doing a tricky bit of business around the house or in your craft or in your livelihood, you know how to concentrate. But this 7th factor of equanimity is one that is a little less familiar, I think, in a regular way. So I want to expand on that for tonight's talk. And I'll quote from a few wise people along the way, maybe read a poem or two. And the first wise teaching is from Dolly Parton. And Dolly says, if you want the rainbow, you gotta put up with the rain. If you want the rainbow, you gotta put up with the rain. It's actually a lovely statement of equanimity, this quality of being with what is. We don't get to cherry pick our experiences. We try. We certainly try to gravitate toward the pleasurable and pleasant and wanted experiences. And we certainly try to avoid or gravitate away from the unpleasant or unwanted or nasty or difficult experiences, but we're not successful. We can be a little bit successful, and that's good. You can cultivate wholesome living situations and friends. You can try to take reasonable, good care of your body and your mind, and that will help a bit. You can try to avoid obvious pitfalls and negativities and situations that have led to harm several times, and maybe we wake up and realize that's not wholesome for us. But we can't have rainbows without rain. We can't have love without loss. Somebody dies before the other one most of the time. We can't have food without hunger at times, and so on and so forth. So equanimity. If you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain. I want to teach equanimity tonight in the context of another Dharma teaching of the Buddha, of the 4 worldly concerns, sometimes called the 4 worldly winds. And I want to remind those of us in the Pacific Northwest, anyway, of the great storm of 2018. December 18th, I think it was. 2018, I was seeing patients that day and the power went out, and I was seeing patients by candlelight, which was actually kind of groovy, the very few that could make their way to me. And I knew it was a pretty bad storm by our limited standards. We don't have many storms here, come on, but no hurricanes, no gigantic ice storms like in other places on the continent. But for us, it was a big deal. And I knew it was a big deal that the winds of change had blown a lot of trouble into people's lives when I had one of my patients, good old redneck. I love rednecks. I'm born from one. This is not a dig, meaning he's a regular guy that works hard with a big-ass truck. And he called me and said, so I'm trying to get to my appointment. but Herd Road is closed. There's trees all down, so I'm going to go the other way. I'll be a little late. Phone rings again. I get another message. So I tried going through Halem Road. There's a tree down. It's flooded. Can't get through. I'm going to be a little late. I'm like, dang, if he can't make it, it must be chaos out there. Because this is a guy that would have made it almost come hell or high water, but could not broach the storm of 2019. And so winds come. They blow things round. They create chaos sometimes. They knock down trees. They knock out power lines. We could all share our stories, the local folks here. My home was without power for 3 days, which wasn't a big deal, but I had friends who had no power for 7 days, and it was right before Christmas, right? So people's food was going, rotten out of the freezer and the fridge, and the ferries were all canceled. We were meant to leave the next day and go to the mainland to see my partner's parents. We had to cancel that trip. No big deal. That's the thing. For us, it was no big deal because we were in pretty good mental states at the time, and lucky for us, the trees didn't fall on anything important like the cat or the dog or our heads or the roof. So it was just an amusing, somewhat minor inconvenience. But for other people, I have a lot of patients and friends where trees came down on their fence lines and on their houses and whatnot. No loss of life or injury in folks I knew, but there was one death in Duncan from a tree falling on an encampment of some homeless persons. Extremely sad. Very sad. The winds of change. Sometimes they blow things we like a cool breeze on a too hot day. Sometimes they blow chaos and change that we don't want. And I observed that night, for a long circuitous reason that doesn't matter very much, but I had family members who were trying to get to Vancouver that day to see a Canucks game. These tickets had been bought as a gift, months before by my little sister for my father. And they spent 4 or 5 hours at the ferry terminal being told, the next one's going to sail, and none of them sailed. So they came home, and by then the Trans-Canada from Nanaimo to Duncan was take about 3-4 hours because all the lights were out, and it was 4-way stops on the highway, and they were hungry and tired and dismayed, and we decided to come to the rescue, and my partner went into town to see if he could get a spot to eat at one of the only places that had power in Duncan, which was the little cluster at Boston Pizza and Wendy's, and that little cluster had power. Right next to it, it was all black. Most of the town was black that night. So we get there, and there are, hundreds of cars, I guess, around there, and about a line about 30 or 40 people long of cars through the Wendy's drive-through because nothing was open. The grocery stores were all shut. The power was out. And big line at Boston Pizza, but my partner took one for the team and stood in line for a while so that when they got there and I got there, we had a table in a rather busy restaurant. And it was really interesting to watch the mind states of the people who had to wait an hour for a table because the entire Cowichan Valley was pretty much without power. You'd think that the world was ending. The negativity from some beings, others were lovely and gracious, and others were just tired. But some of the negativity, the hostility, the self-importance of, what do you mean there's an hour-long wait? Well, use your brain, dude. Look around. Of course there's a wait. You're not special. I'm not special. None of us are special. The winds blew some things in, and it changed things. Could we have equanimity? Could we be with things as they were? Long waits, long lines, lots of traffic. Because every other being pretty much wants what we want. To be warm, to have food, to be safe, and to get home. And when we forget that we're not special, we lose equanimity. When we think we're special and we want what we want and we don't want what we don't want, these winds of change, these 8 worldly winds, yes, I'm going to list them in a moment, blow us about like an untethered boat on the ocean, just being blown randomly, smashed on the rocks, sent out to sea, and eventually potentially sunk. Equanimity can be thought of in that analogy as a terrific flexible anchor line, absolutely unbreakable to the absolute bowels of the earth, up to that boat. The boat here is your mind. And no matter how bad the storm storms and the winds go and the waves crash, your boat may be smacked about, but it is unshakable at base. It won't be torn free. It won't be thrown on the rocks. It may be rocked or worse, but it will remain floating and come back to center. That's a good analogy for the mind of equanimity when it's being buffeted by the 8 worldly winds. The 8 worldly winds are taught in pairs as the sort of the desired side and the undesired side. The side we want, the side we don't want. And I'll list them to begin, and then I'll speak a little bit about each pair. They're sometimes called the 4 hopes and the 4 fears. And when we're in hope or fear, we are suffering. We're wanting, hoping for something we don't have, or hoping this good thing will stay, or we're in fear we might lose it and it might go away, or we're in fear something bad might come. So the first pair is translated as pleasure or pain, sometimes translated as happiness versus suffering. So this first pair, pleasure versus pain, or happiness versus suffering. I'll talk a little bit about each of these, but let me list them first. The second pair, the third and fourth of the 8, is fame versus insignificance. Fame versus insignificance, sometimes translated as fame or disrepute. The third pair is praise versus blame. Praise and blame. And the fourth pair of these 8 is gain and loss. Gain and loss. So let's look a little bit about them and attempt to relate it to how equanimity can help us navigate these inevitable winds of change that will blow through our life. Sometimes, what do they say? An ill will blows no good, but sometimes a good wind can bring great joy and great happiness. The difficulties in when we're jumping after the good winds and fleeing from the bad winds, we can never have any peace. We can never have any release from suffering. So pleasure, pain, or happiness versus suffering. This one, I think, is fairly apparent to us. Happiness is something we all want. It's even in the U.S., is it the Constitution? The pursuit of happiness. Dumbest vow ever. Think about it. It was well-intentioned, I would think. Very well-intentioned. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you're pursuing happiness, you're suffering. Fundamental Buddha Dharma. If you're reaching for happiness, if you're seeking happiness, if you're wanting happiness, I do this because it's a leaning forward to, please, can I pursue? If it's at life, liberty, and the acceptance of happiness and unhappiness, it would be a brilliant statement. So it's very close. Just needs a little tiny edit. Happiness we want. We're not fools. We can seek it. But if we are seeking happiness and fearing suffering, seeking pleasure and fearing pain, we're very, very insecure. So let's say something happy is happening for us. We're in a good love affair. We've had a baby. We've got a new kitten. We've just been given a promotion or won a job we want. Had a good day at work. Our house, we painted and we love the color. Something that feels like a temporary state of happiness. We're good, we're happy. That's beautiful. Nowhere does the Buddha say, don't be happy. What he says is, don't cling to the happiness. Accept that by the first noble truth of impermanence, happiness will come and go. These things will come and go. And that's okay. That would be the equanimity part. It's okay. So let's say that happy thing is happening, the love affair, the kitten or puppy or cup of perfect hot chocolate. If we can simply enjoy the happiness that's here, we're good. But often there's this little needle, this little poke, this little thorn of, I hope it stays. Even with a cup of hot chocolate. Maybe I'm the only one. But if it's a really good cup of hot chocolate and it's a small cup, espresso or tea or whatever, maybe wine if that's your thing, and you're about halfway through, there's going to be this little tiny thorn of, oh, it's so good, it's going to be gone soon. little tiny want of wanting, little tiny pinprick in the rose of your happiness. And certainly with being in a love affair or having a job you really want or a position you really want, there can also be that little fear that it'll go away. They'll leave me, or they'll die, they'll get cancer, or they'll stop being young and pretty, or whatever one is afraid of. And so happiness can have a thorn in it if we're also clinging or wanting or insecure about being okay with the flip side. If we're okay with the flip side, being okay with it is equanimity. Doesn't mean we like it. Doesn't mean we like pain or suffering. But if we're sort of okay with it, we can accept it. We're not in fear. Fear of the change, fear of the pain coming. Once we have happiness, fear can arise because we fear losing it. And when suffering or pain arises, physical pain, emotional pain, the pain of loss or other things, if we hope for it to be over, we want it to be gone, it generally increases the pain, right? This heartbreak, this aching body, this argument and disconnect with a dear friend. I just want it to be better. I don't want it to be like this. Often that increases the sense of suffering. These are two of the winds that blow us about if we let them. If we're an untethered boat, if we're a mind without ballast or training, we'll be just high and then smash and then okay and then terrible and super happy and then depressed. And most of us have experienced variations of what I just said there, feeling like it's just up to those outer circumstances whether I'm okay or not. Please let it be good winds today. That's a very vulnerable place to place your well-being. On the very first evening, I talked a little bit about why be in retreat, and that the more we try to fiddle the outer to keep safe, it won't really work. Same idea. We're fiddling the outer to, try to keep the happy stuff and try to avoid the painful stuff. Instead, what if we train the mind, the emotions, the heart, the being to accept with some grace and some equanimity the happy winds and the sad winds, the pleasurable winds and the painful winds. That doesn't mean you give up or are passive. It means you face the truth that some winds are really tough. And then that may give you the strength to bear it with grace until the wind shifts and something else comes along. There's it's quoted in different places in different ways, so I don't know the actual origin of this story, a Zen story, a Buddhist story, a something else story, but it's the story of the farmer, and it's an old farmer in somewhere other than here, a land far away, and he has a horse, and he has a little farm, and he's quite poor, and he uses the horse to till his field. And one day the horse comes up lame and he can't till his field, so he'll have to do back-breaking work on his own, and he might not get his crops in on time. And his neighbors come over, as nosy neighbors do, and they say, "Oh, what bad luck, what bad luck, your horse is lame, you can't get your crops in time." Not offering to help, mind you. And he says, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" They're a bit puzzled by that, and they go away. The next day he goes to find his horse, and his horse is actually broken out of the paddock and is gone. Neighbors come, "Oh no, bad luck, bad luck." He says, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" The next day the horse comes back, bringing with it 2 wild, strong horses. The neighbors come over and they say, "This is terrific. You're so lucky. You've got these 2 beautiful, strong horses to train now. Good luck for you, my friend. Good luck." And he says, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" Then the next day his son is coming to train the new horses and work with them and tame them, and he's gets on one's back, and he's bucked off and he breaks his leg rather badly. The nosy neighbors come over and say, "Oh, this is terrible luck, such bad luck. Your son is injured, he can't help you now. It will take him a long time to heal." Farmer says, "You know it. Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" The next day, the mercenary army comes through for a not noble civil war, and they're taking all able-bodied young men from all the farms, and they can't take his son because his son's laid up with the broken leg, and the neighbors come rejoicing and say, such good luck. Good luck, bad luck, who knows? That's equanimity. Who knows? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It is what it is. The horse is lame, the horse is gone, the horse is back with 2 able-bodied horses. My son is hurt. My son doesn't go to fight in an unjust war where he's likely to die. We don't know what the outcome will be. And when we react to the event as good luck or bad luck, we don't know. Who knows? It's a very good teaching, that little story. The second pair, fame versus insignificance. How much do each of us suffer from this? Some of us more, some of us less. But this teaching relates also to the teaching of self-referencing. Self-referencing is a phrase used in Dharma that's really about our image of who we are, how much we filter our experience through me, hint, most of us a lot, and how much, according to the Buddha, our kind of addiction and conviction of this self that is Cheryl, that's a certain way, that I want to feel a certain way and be perceived a certain way, is one of the major roots of our suffering. So self-referencing can be as simple as you're walking with a friend and you notice a beautiful cherry blossom tree. And you say, oh, look at the beautiful tree. And your friend says, oh, I love cherry blossom trees. They're my favorite kind. That's a perfectly innocent sentence, one that I've said and you've said many, many, many times. Someone says, oh, I got a box full of lobster for my friend back east. And you say, oh, I love lobster. But start noticing perhaps how much you do that. How much you take an experience and, not surprisingly, filter it through your experience. Self-referencing. So you look at this bell and you think, oh, that's a lot like my bell, or I'd like a bell like that, or I could never make a bell like that. Please understand there's nothing wrong or bad about you, that's a natural tendency. What do we train children with? Whose nose is that? It's your nose. We train them from pre-verbal. My nose, my ears, my mummy, my bell. Can't have my bell. We're trained. Me, mine, me, mine, me, mine. And this can really lead to a tremendous amount of suffering. So this second worldly wind pair, fame versus insignificance, plays on our ego reflection of who we are and how much pain and agony we can have when we're fallen into disrepute, and how much pleasure and pumped up feeling we can feel when we're seen with fame. Very simply, someone says, you're the best, insert your profession or hobby here. You're the best hockey player on the team. You're the best Dharma teacher ever. You're the best mom. You're the best cook. And in a way, that's playing to our fame. And most of us enjoy, if it's a sincere compliment, it's not manipulative, we enjoy that. It feels nice. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong if we hold it gently, like sand in an open hand, and we let it run through our hand. So, if it's a sincere compliment about something we've strived to do well, thank you. Move on. But how many people, including certain world leaders, are desperately in need of feeling fame, feeling pumped up, feeling that they're important, feeling that they're the best, or whatever. And what's the flip side of that? Dreadful, profound, agonizing insecurity or insignificance. The translation again is fame versus insignificance, or fame versus ill repute. So you go one day from being considered, I don't know, let's say Oprah Winfrey of all people, goes from one day from being revered by a great many people and considered to be a great leader and a great thinker and someone who does tremendous work for many underprivileged persons and really tries to bring great knowledge to people. And then it turns out that she's got a puppy murdering farm in her backyard or something. And in a day, she goes, to be hated and reviled. right? She's nothing like we thought she was. She's a hypocrite. She's horrible. So it's a bit of a dumb example, but from fame to disrepute. That could happen to any of us at any moment. At any moment. Goodness gracious. At any moment, a false rumor could take all of us down in terms of how we're perceived, yeah? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't need to make up the ugly kind of false rumors. You can think of them yourself. That if it was, put in the newspaper or bandied about, your career could be over. Even if it was entirely untrue. From fame to disrepute. That's a pretty insecure place to stand. Equanimity would say, fame or disrepute, I'm okay. Obviously, we'd prefer not fame per se, but being seen for our good qualities and people having gentle, grounded appreciation for our good qualities would be the wholesome side of fame. And we'd prefer people didn't, for this example, inaccurately think we were something other than we were, and our reputation is in tatters, as the phrase goes. Your reputation's in tatters. Whether you actually made mistakes and did do unskillful things, the way we all do, or whether they were fabricated or misunderstood, how easily we can feel on top of the world or crushed to earth by the winds of this pair of fame versus insignificance. And let's be serious. We're in a culture that's more obsessed with fame than ever before. I mean, in the 1950s and 60s, movie stardom and rock stardom was quite a hysterical thing. But there wasn't the social media and the instant gratification piece. I can't remember. Oh, it was Taylor Swift, the young singer Taylor Swift, pop singer. She said how she has never asked for an autograph, ever. She's never asked for an autograph. What she asked for? Can I get my picture with you? Right? It's all selfies with the person. We used to say, hey, you're someone who's accomplished that I admire. Can I have your autograph? Could I have sort of a, this is lovely. It's like, wow, I met Bob Dylan and he gave me an autograph. That's cool. A little piece of fame felt good, but now it's all about me in the fame. Me in the fame. Who was, it's an actor called Nick Offerman. He was on a show called Parks and Recreation that I didn't watch. His wife plays Karen on Will and Grace. They're two actors, and I was listening to a interview with the two of them, and he was talking about how his policy, he's often approached in restaurants, as anyone with some television fame tends to be, and he has a policy, if people ask him for a picture, he says no, and he says it very gracefully and very nicely. He says, no, but I'd be happy to talk to you for a few minutes. Make a human connection. Like, are you actually interested in connecting? Or do you just want a little self-referencing bit of fame? I thought that was really wise. Because he didn't say it from a place of rejection or anger. He's just like, no, actually, I don't do photos, but I'm happy to chat for a few minutes if you like. And most people just kind of look gobsmacked and don't have anything to say. Because they're not there about him. They're there about them. Here's me with a famous person. Right? So it's harder than ever. I think the egos can be more fragile and more self-referential just because of a cultural milieu of new media to say, unless I show it to the world and make myself famous, it doesn't count. I mean, for goodness sakes, people, make a burrito and they have to put it on social media. Look at the burrito I made! Don't care! Not because I'm mean, because I don't care. It's insignificant. It's famous. It's this, it's that. It doesn't matter. I care about the quality of your heart and your mind. And I hope you enjoy the burrito and share it with all beings. I don't need to see a picture of it. No offense if I'm not your Facebook friend. I'm almost nobody's Facebook friend, okay? So fame versus insignificance. And we can giggle, but I hope we can also maybe a little uncomfortably turn this lens on ourselves. And while you may not be running around getting tons of pictures with rock stars or whatever, now there are exceptions. Richard Gere, Roger Daltrey, I'm getting a photo with those two. But other than that, nope, can't be bothered. We've all got our weaknesses. We've all got our weaknesses. But where are we too invested in our reputation, including with our close friends, our family, our neighbor? What if there's a tiny, innocent misunderstanding between, say, you and a neighbor you don't know particularly well? Maybe when you moved into your apartment, you were told, slot 5A was yours for your car. So you park in slot 5A. and an irate person comes pounding on your door and says, 5A is my parking place. Get out of my parking. And you're like, oh, I'm really sorry. Landlord said it was 5A. Well, it's not. It's been mine for 5 years. Damn it. And they run away. And you're like, oh, no. A lot of times people are very agitated because now this neighbor doesn't like me. Neighbor doesn't like their own mind. Neighbor doesn't like their own story. Neighbor wasn't able to hear the data of, oh, I was misinformed, and of course I'll happily move my car. Ideally, we can let that go and bless and release and gracefully send good thoughts to the neighbor. But often we don't. We're concerned, oh no, now they think I'm selfish or took their spot or a bad person. So this one's a little uncomfortable sometimes to examine in ourselves. Where are we in terms of our self-referencing, our need to feel important, significant? There are healthy human needs for connection, to be seen for who we are with a loving eye by people that we care about. But when it gets to this leaning forward into needing to be seen a certain way, we're in suffering. And those winds will blow us back and forth, back and forth. There's another story of a female yogini in India on the path of awakening, walking through, and she has, I don't know how to describe it, but sort of like 2 bags that hang over her neck or across her shoulders that she can put things in. And as she walks through the countryside, she meets people who says, you know, you're so beautiful, I so admire the work you're doing as an awakening being, you're such a what's the word, inspiration, and those are lovely compliments, and for every compliment she picks up a white stone and puts it in one of the bags. And then she runs into people who, you know, say negative things, you're foolish, get out of my way, what a stupid woman you are, and for every negative thing she takes a black stone and puts it in the other bag, and she moves gracefully through the world with equanimity, and at the end of the night she empties both bags into a pile of black and white stones and begins again. Because they don't matter. She doesn't need to carry them. That's the message. We don't need to carry these reflections of other people onto us. We can go inside and know who we are and continue to improve our intentions, our ethics, our compassion, and our wisdom. And if something negative is thrown at us, what I try to do is take it, look at it, evaluate whether there's some truth and there's something I need to tune up or clean up, learn if there's something to learn, and move on. I'm not always successful. Some stick, some hurt. But really, it's just fame or disrepute. It's just fame or insignificance. I wrote an article. I'm a writer, and I write for several magazines and online magazines, and in the area of love and relationship and sexuality. And I was asked to write an article answering a question from a reader for a column for Thrive Global, where readers send in questions about relationship. And this person's question was essentially, my wife has lost her attraction to me and she'd like to explore an open relationship. I do not want an open relationship. Is my marriage over? So I answered the question, and I talked about open relationship and non-monogamy as a model that can work for a minority of people. I quoted some statistics, around 4% allegedly, and said, I philosophically have no problem with the concept of an open relationship. In my clinical experience, though, and according to the data, usually it's unsuccessful and it leads to a lot of pain and whatnot. And given that you, the person asking the question, clearly don't want that, here's some advice. Holy blowback. Holy, Cheryl got eaten by the wolves. By a minority of persons who are very advocating of the open marriage lifestyle, which I am not philosophically or clinically opposed of, which was actually like in the article. But I got a lot of, you're down on open marriage and you're just, heteronormative, blah, like hate, like vicious attacks and all this in the comments on when the things, and that hadn't happened before. Generally, people like what I write. I was like, whoa, these people hate me. And then the editor said, because I wrote and said, whoa, lots of blowback. And there was tons of positive comments too. But I said, people are really upset. And he wrote back, he says, yeah, we have a saying around the office that if you're in social media as a manager or an editor, if you don't cry in the shower once a day, you're not doing your job right. I'm like, All right then, I think I feel better, I think. He's saying, let it go. People who say that stuff didn't even read the article. They just read the headline, which I didn't write, by the way. Generally, the editor writes the headline. And it was very interesting to see that for like an hour, I was quite consternated. Because there were really personal, virulent attacks on me as a bad person. And what's more, the accusations weren't even what I think, nor what I had written. I'd actually written, So it was a great experience of this kind of fame and disrepute, And people saying, oh, great article, so she's so clever, or whatever. From going, she's evil and should burn in hell. I'm like, oh, that's new. So it was lovely because I got to kind of tune up that whole, either don't read the comments or, really have equanimity before you go in to take a look. So we get these opportunities to practice. They're everywhere. Whether you accidentally take your neighbor's parking place or write an article answering a question that people get upset about. There you go. The editor's like, wow, we got more responses than we have to any of our other articles. Would you write another controversial one, please? I'm like, okay, controversy sells. There you go. The third pair, praise and blame. Similar to fame and insignificance. Fame and insignificance is more about our reputation and our self-view or how we're viewed. Praise and blame is a little more personal and simple, like when people give you a compliment or give you a criticism. How does that hit us? It's a dangerous one if we're really susceptible to praise, and a lot of us are. We may or may not have got a lot of validation, even from terrific parents growing up. It may not have been a family where you were told, well done, Bobby. Great job, Sue. It may have just been, I don't want them to get full of themselves, right? Kind of a view that used to be around. So some people grow up with kind of a hole in their psyche around really being hungry for praise, for acknowledgement, just to be seen. I don't mean silly or effusive praise. I mean the simplicity of your boss occasionally saying, hey, nice job on the report. Well done. Regular kind of pleasant praise. But when we're really susceptible to it, suffering. And what's more, we can kind of be preyed upon by sales jobs or con men or, this deal's just for you because you're so special. You're one of the few who could ever manage to actually do this thing. And we're like, oh, me? Me? Oh, of course, here's my $10,000. So praise and blame are good to also evaluate the winds of praise blowing our way, the winds of blame or criticism or negativity blowing our way. Equanimity helps us stay more stable in those winds. And if it's sincere, as previously mentioned, sincere compliments or acknowledgement, I really appreciate the extra effort you put in. Thank you for staying that hour overtime. Really appreciate it. Lovely. Let it be in and flow out without clinging. That's beautiful. That's the compassion, loving kindness. But when we seek or want or are hanging on for or are wounded if the praise isn't forthcoming and are wounded when the criticism is forthcoming, then we're in a very fragile state around our non-self stability and the ability to go, oh, okay, thank you. Saying thank you to criticism is an interesting practice. You're really, oh, thank you for the feedback. I'll consider that. That's helpful. Whew, that's an interesting practice. And if the mind's like, yeah, but they're full of nonsense, and I know that this isn't true. It might not be true, and they might be full of nonsense. But still, it's a chance to practice with your mind. The Buddha says that your enemy is your greatest teacher. Right? So the person who comes at you throwing out whatever they're throwing out, it gives us a chance to work with our mind with, does aversion arrive? Does anger arrive? Does collapsing, sort of grief, pity arise? Can we say, this is tough. Equanimity, self-compassion, kindness. And then to a sort of an accountability of self. Is there anything I can learn from this accusation or criticism? Sometimes we'll say, no, I don't think so. I don't think there's validity to what was thrown my way. It's more about that person's mind state than an accurate reflection of what I did or thought, so I'll let it go. Praise and blame. Gain and loss. This in particular we can relate to the gain and loss of material possessions. It's a good way to work with this one, that the winds of change can blow gain our way, some financial gain, some windfalls, or excellent rewards to your business development, or a bonus at work, nice things, beautiful clothes, a car you like, all that good stuff. And then loss can happen. I mentioned, I think last night, about being with my friend 2 years ago in their house, and all the houses around them burnt to the ground. Boom, there goes everything. My suitcase was in there, and I'd been traveling and working and teaching some big events, so I had all my, and I have very few, I'm kind of a Dharma hippie, but I have a few nice clothes that I use when I'm on stage at big events. So all my, my good clothes, my good makeup, which I rarely wear, but when I'm on stage I do, my good shoes, all my like special stuff was in that suitcase that got burned up. Oh well, big deal. Her entire house and every single thing she owned got burned up. That puts it all in perspective. Gain and loss, gain and loss, gain and loss. I still, 2 years later, when I was putting some things in a bag for this retreat, my fabulous, fashionable wardrobe, I was looking for a certain yoga top I really like to wear on retreats because it's comfortable and it's good for the belly. Couldn't find it. I'm like, oh yeah, it must have got burned up. 2 years later, you still find gain and loss, little things, right? And it can hurt if we let it, when we lose things. I'm talking about inanimate things at the moment. This, of course, applies to other things too, but things come, things go, things get broken. Impermanence is real. Nothing lasts forever. A great practice of renunciation to kind of help shake up our attachment to objects, our fear of loss, is to give some of your favorite stuff away. Right? Next time you're going through and culling the clothes in your closet to pass on to a charitable cause, take one piece you really, really like and send that as well. It's a really great practice. It's not easy. I've done it. I'm like, oh no, not the pink leather jacket. I love the pink leather jacket. It had zebra lining. Now, I'm the only one who thinks that's a great jacket, but I effing love that jacket. But I gave it away. Because I was practicing renunciation. So I hoped someone was going to go to the thrift store and go, oh, this is really cool and different than what one can usually get here. Yay. It's just a fun, interesting way to play with the mind. Just give away things you like, not just the things you're tired of. I know, it's such an unusual concept. And when things are damaged or broken, can you have equanimity about that? I went out to my vehicle. I have no particular attachment to my vehicle. It's useful to drive dogs around, basically. But it was a bit muddy and dirty, and I hadn't noticed that on the passenger side, because I don't usually get in the passenger side, someone sometime in the last couple of weeks had keyed my car right from nose to stern. It's got an okay paint job. It's, not a fancy car at all. And I was like, oh, did I drive past a really nasty thorn bush? I guess so. And then I looked again, and it's just, anyway, the dude at the body shop said, oh no, that was deliberate. And I was like, oh, it like bothered me like 0.0000001%. It was just an observation of, oh, okay, there's huge scratches in the paint of the car. I don't really care. It was a nice feeling. It was a nice feeling of equanimity around the loss of a paint job, I guess. There were other things that would have distressed me quite a bit. Were I to lose this necklace, I'd be more affected because it has all sorts of significance to me. I'd be disappointed. I wouldn't be like all super torn up about it, but I'd be more dismayed than the car thing. Each of us has our things that we're more attached to. They have emotional significance. Sometimes they have monetary significance. We worked really hard for them, or they're precious. We brought them from a trip. But they're just things. Gain and loss, gain and loss. The winds of gain and loss will come and go. If your house is all burned down when we're here, I hope very much they don't. And all of your stuff is gone. You're okay, and say all the humans and pets got out. Ultimately, it's just stuff. ultimately things come and things go. But how much anxiety do we have about our stuff? And I don't just mean our stuff, but like our mortgage and our home and our security and all these other impermanent things. So much anxiety and thinking and planning. And I'm not saying don't have stuff, and I'm certainly not saying don't have beautiful, supportive stuff. That can be lovely for the states of mind to enjoy a beautiful, comfortable surrounding. Just don't cling to it. If it disappears, or it makes sense to sell everything or move to something tiny because you can meditate more or be of more service to the world, then great, it's just stuff. You could let it go. There's a study I like to mention in terms of our fear of not having enough stuff. And it's a study that was done, I think, out of Harvard, but I can't recall. I'd have to check to make sure that's an accurate reference. And they studied millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires. And they asked them questions trying to find out, does money make you happy, essentially? And what they found that across the board, the millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires had two main worries. One was that their children would be kind of messed up, growing up very, very, very wealthy. These were generally self-made millionaires and billionaires, so they knew the difference between poverty and working hard and creating wealth. And they were concerned, my kids might not end up okay because they were born into incredible privilege. And their other worry was that they didn't have enough money. And across the board, they were asked, what would it take for you to feel comfortable, for you to not feel insecure, for you to feel more confident? And across the board, the millionaires, the multimillionaires, and the billionaires all said, if we just had 10% more, then we'd relax. So clearly that doesn't work, right? But it's a beautiful example, whether you make $20,000 a year or $20 million a year. If I just had 10% more. And what the actual happiness data indicates is that for a family of 4 in the U.S., this is a bit of an older study, so the numbers may be a bit different now. But if a family of 4 in the U.S., in a regular Midwestern, not very expensive place, not in San Francisco or Manhattan or something, if they had approximately $45,000 a year, enough that they could pay for housing or a good rental, they had food for their kids and transportation, more money than that didn't increase happiness. Right? If your basic needs were somewhat taken care of and you didn't have to worry about how you were going to feed your children and yourself, or that you'd be evicted at any minute, extra money didn't make much difference. But we don't really believe that. I can't tell you how many students have heard that and said, I'm willing to try that out. I think I'd be okay with just the first million and I wouldn't need 10% more. Fair enough. But it plays with our ideas of gain and loss, and this illusory idea, this idea of the illusory security we would have if we had more money. Right? More money could be useful, but it's not going to make you feel happy all the time or safe all the time. There's a writer whose name I may mispronounce. He wrote Zorba the Greek and other books. It's Nicholas Kazanakis, or some such lovely Greek name. And on his tombstone, he's dead, by the way, on his tombstone, what he had engraved was no hope, no fear, free. That's equanimity. No hope, no fear, free. If we're not caught in hope and wanting, clinging, if we're not caught in aversion and pushing away and fear, we're free. We're free of suffering. I don't think he was a Buddha Dharma person. He was just a wise person who chose a very good quote. Now here's the trick. I don't want you to have to be dead to be without the hope or the fear. This is what we cultivate in this life, in this body, in this mind now with the cultivation of equanimity. When we're in hope, can we gently attempt to loosen our leaning into hope and just say, even if that doesn't happen, things will be okay. When we're in fear, what if the lump's malignant? Can we say, even if that happens, we'll figure out what to do about it? Even if the life is shortened, if the lump is malignant, we'll figure out how to deal with that. That's the practical outcome of equanimity. No matter what's happening, We'll figure it out. No matter what's happening, we'll be okay until we're not, meaning dead. Pretty great to live our life that way. Fearless. Fearless. Pema Chodron, the beautiful teacher, she says, to cultivate equanimity, we practice catching ourselves when we feel attraction or aversion before it hardens into grasping or negativity. I'll repeat that. To cultivate equanimity, we practice catching ourselves when we feel attraction or aversion before it hardens into grasping or negativity. So if we can practice noticing the more minor tendency of mind towards attraction or hope, or the tendency towards, she's saying, the language she's using, attraction or aversion. So attraction is that hope, that wanting. Aversion is that fear, that not wanting. But just the subtle tendency, if we could catch it, sort of gentle it out, sort of calm it down, sort of let it go, before it turns into, she says, hardens into grasping or negativity, that's the cultivation of equanimity. So the tendency to, I would like that, hey, it's okay. We're all right without it too. Maybe it will come and maybe it won't. Good luck, bad luck, who knows? So there's this quality in your meditation. You can track the mind when it starts to want something. You want the teacher to ring the bell. You want this great state of meditation to last. Right? A few of you have reported that, very common experience that, oh, I'm actually feeling really good in the meditation. And then this little bit of clinging hope voice comes in. Wow, this is great. I hope it lasts. Right? That's when there's a little bit of that leaning into hope. And if you just go, okay, whether it lasts or not, here we are, that can help the meditation deepen when you move out of the hope or the fear. Just a few more notes here. One teacher, I neglected to write the name down, I apologize for that, talks about certain practices to help us develop equanimity. These are sort of life practices, and they're interesting to contemplate. One is cultivating a balanced emotion towards all living things. Cultivating a balanced emotion towards all living things. What does that mean? Well, at the fundamental level, it means loving all beings, as we talked a bit about last night, the ones you like and the ones you don't like. Cultivating a balanced attitude towards all of them. Trying not to be overly attached to the people you love, the pets you love. That's tough. Really tough. It's a great place to practice. This doesn't mean you stop loving them, cherishing them, and celebrating them, but can we loosen some of our scared, fearful attachment, right? We were over on Galiano Island a week or so ago. I spent 3 days with Lama Mark over there, and we had some pet sitters in the house. We have 2 dogs and 2 cats. And for whatever reason, the cats got a bit spooked for some reason. And they stayed away for about a day and didn't come in to be fed or anything. And this is extremely unusual for our one cat who hardly ever leaves the house. So I'm getting these texts from the house sitters saying, you know, Jasmine, we haven't seen her in a day and she hasn't been in to eat. And if Jasmine's not in the house, where she is 95% of the time, my concern was she might have been hit on the road or something, which I did not tell the big guy because he couldn't have handled it. So I just kept it to myself, but kept my little worry to myself. So turned out they were fine. They got spooked maybe by the people's child or something, and they were just kind of hanging out in the woods right by the house, you know, not coming in till we came home. And they came home. But it was so interesting to watch the attachment, right? I'm on Galiano, and there's a little worry, a little pinprick. Gosh, I hope she's okay. And if she's not, I'm going to hold Richard together. and that clinging we have, that over-attachment to those we love, and our fear that they won't be okay. Spoiler alert, they won't be okay at some point. None of us will. We'll all pass. So as difficult as it is, you can at least take it as a study. Can I balance my emotion towards all living things? This next one might be an easier one to practice, and it follows from the gain and loss of material things. Balanced emotion towards inanimate things. So that would be the piece of your car gets wrecked, or your house burns down, or your stuff gets taken or lost or broken or whatever. Can you cultivate a balanced emotion towards that? I mean, it's kind of an interesting view that, it's my whatever, it's my necklace. What does that even mean, right? I mean, this sense of ownership. I mean, war and murder and duels and all that stuff are fought over my stuff and your stuff. My side of the fence and your side of the fence. It's a constructed fantasy, this idea of ownership. And in Buddha Dharma, it doesn't make any sense. So you can try to look at that. And also maybe try not to overspend and get new stuff when your old stuff is perfectly fine. I mean, really, people, do we need every iteration of a bloody phone that comes out? Really? It's so weird. I have a perfectly good phone that's like 2-3 years old now, and people are like, oh, you don't have the new bling bling bling? I'm like, no. It rings, I talk, it work. It's so funny though, because even I, who am not super susceptible to gadgetry, I find them useful, but I'm not like hung up on the new stuff. I'm like, oh, whatever, I don't know how to use that app anyway. But even now, the advertising kind of makes me feel like, oh, I must need that new one then, right? It's very powerful, very powerful. So can we build a balanced emotion towards inanimate things? And then I liked how this teacher put it. This was a traditional teacher, a non-Western teacher, an Asian teacher, and he wrote, avoid people who go crazy. And I went, what does that mean? So I read a little bit further. I'm like, first of all, good advice, no argument from me, but what did he mean in terms of equanimity? And then he went on to say, people who go crazy for stuff and for things and for experiences. And, so if we're trying to be a little less attached to our stuff, and you're with friends who are all about the bling and the new phone and the new car, and, your wardrobe's totally uncool, Cheryl, or whatever, you might want to stay away from that from a little bit while you're strengthening your own mind around this. So, because it's easy to be kind of influenced, is kind of what he meant. The fourth practice, he said, choose friends who stay cool. And that's actually would be probably a translation from the Pali word sila, which is one of the main paramita or strengths or ethics, and it translates as ethics or integrity, sila. And the literal translation of sila, although we use it as ethics or integrity, acting in an ethical manner, the 5 precepts and whatnot, the literal translation is cooling out. So it's like cooling out the fire of desire, of wanting, right? Oh, I really want that. Hang out with friends who are cool. Like a lot of us. If one of you was saying, I totally need the new Ferrari, and I'm gonna, never go on any more retreats because I need to pay off my Ferrari loan. Probably, if we were asked, a lot of us in this room would say, well, it's cool that you like Ferraris, but really, is that going to help you with what matters the most to you? Really, when it comes down to it, is it the Ferrari or the retreat, right? So it's helpful to have friends who have a similar view to us. It's great to have friends that are very different. No problem. This speaks to when we're stronger in our view, it's fine to be with people who have a different view. There are extraordinary friends I have and family members who have no interest in the Dharma at all. And they think I'm a little cuckoo to go on 3 and 4 month retreats and take huge financial hits to study Dharma and be in retreat and teach retreat. And one of them said recently, I just don't understand. They weren't being critical. They were being puzzled. I just don't understand why this is so important to you. But then they said, but clearly it is. So it's great. They didn't have the same view. I think it was about me going to Tibet last year, which meant another couple months off work, and it was quite an expensive trip to support the Tibetan lamas we took back there, and they were like, I don't really get it, but clearly it's important to you. But if I were not so strong-minded, and if I were surrounded by a lot of people who said, I don't think you should go, it's too much money, it's a bad time, you should be working, that might waver me, right? So that's what it means to choosing friends who stay cool. You get t-shirts made. Stay cool. And the fifth practice is to incline the mind towards balance. And this is just a straightforward statement of cultivating equanimity. The balanced mind that's not grabbing or pushing away. It's a repetition of these concepts. But incline the mind towards balance. So when you find the mind running away with you, super hopeful and excited about something, just balance it a bit. Remain hopeful and excited in a more grounded way. Oh, I really, really look forward to that. X, Y, Z. Good. But if you're all like daydreaming and you're living 3 months in the future when that thing's going to happen to kind of get you through the slog of daily life till you get to that thing, that's not so good. It means you're missing the 3 months leading up to that trip or event or visit or something. Incline the mind toward balance. A reminder, equanimity is not a detached state. The Buddha says that a mind suffused with equanimity is radiant, illuminated, warm, and happy. It's not some sort of aloof distance. Most of you will know, or know of anyway, the wonderful, now deceased singer, wonderful depending on your musical taste, Leonard Cohen. Wonderful poet anyway. Well, I guess depending on your poetry taste, too. He's not for everybody. But Leonard Cohen, as you may know, was a very serious Buddha Dharma practitioner in the Zen tradition. He spent many, many years and months and different times in deep, deep Zen retreat, very structured, very sort of fearsome retreat practice, very stripped down, a lot of meditation, a lot of austerity. And when I was very, very early interested in the path 30 years ago or so, I read some article with Leonard Cohen, and he was wearing sort of all gray Zen robes and looking very dour. Leonard didn't have like a cheery looking face, let's be honest. And it was like, and I thought that's what Buddha Dharma was partly about. I thought it was essentially, life is suffering and then you die, which arguably is how the Four Noble Truths are sometimes presented. It's not accurate. Suffering, yeah, and joy, beauty, and awakening. That part should get mentioned. But I thought that the essential teaching was pleasure rejecting. Now, in some cases that's taught that way. We won't go into that right now. But I didn't understand that that's not equanimity. That's my misunderstanding again. And it's like, avoid all pleasure. Right? To be frank, I thought, I don't want me none of that, and I didn't pursue Dharma for a while. I don't want no avoid all pleasure. I wanted freedom from suffering. And my teachers, and many of your teachers, and this humble being in my own way, love pleasure. My teachers love pleasure in a very non-attached way. I can't claim that. Namja Rinpoche's home was filled with beautiful objects from travels. He had cases of silks from India, beautiful silks and tapestries and beautiful pottery from different travels. And it was because he would have students over for class or for meals, and sometimes he'd say, bring out the silks. And I didn't used to really quite know why, other than we all thoroughly enjoyed looking at these beautiful objects, touching these beautiful, exquisite pieces of craft work and craftsmanship and weaving, etc. And I came to know and came to understand, and Lama Mark's home is very similar on Galliano. Partly it's to help people contact positive qualities of mind. You bring these beautiful objects and people get investigative and curious and pleasure and calm, and they look and they're concentrated. It's beauty when you're not attached to it, you're not clinging to it. It can really help warm the mind and heart and help lead students and beings to feel the qualities of mind that are possible. So it's a very interesting exploration of beauty. How about, a single beautiful little object or a beautiful stone, and really appreciate it, but without clinging, not like, this stone makes me happy. I need it, I want it. Don't touch my stone, Dwight. Not that kind of thing. It's just, that's lovely. A flower, a hummingbird, a blade of grass, but appreciation of beauty can gladden and brighten the mind. So again, this isn't a detached sort of, I have equanimity. I don't care. That's not equanimity, that's negativity and aversion and nihilism. So don't confuse the two. I think that's plenty for tonight, but I do have a couple of, I have a little saying I want to read you. So I'm going to freak you all out now by bringing out a cell phone. It's on airplane mode, but it was where I keep a lot of notes of poems and quotes and things. So this is from the Dhammapada, and it's a quote of the Buddha, where speaking about equanimity. Maybe interpreted a little bit. I'm not going to say he said these exact words. The Buddha on equanimity. As a solid mass of rock is not stirred by the wind, so a sage is not moved by praise and blame. As a deep lake is clear and undisturbed, so a sage becomes clear upon hearing the Dharma. Virtuous people always let go. They don't prattle about pleasures and desires. Touched by happiness and then by suffering, the sage shows no signs of being elated or depressed. That's smoothness of mind, of equanimity. So, in a moment we'll sit for about 10 minutes. I'll close with another poem and then a dedication of the merit. And as per usual, you can keep practicing as long as you wish. Tomorrow, the program will be similar to today, at least in the morning until lunch. So could I please have a volunteer to ring the bell for the 6:30 sit? So ringing the bell at, thank you, Joshua Akari, 6:25. Good and loud. Have fun with it. Thank you. And we'll be in for the silent sit and then moving yoga before breakfast. So settling in, doing your pre-flight safety check. Do it in 15-20 seconds. Stretch up, drop back, gentle roll of those shoulders, checking in with the chin. Adjust, let the belly go, settle into posture, and a touch of a smile. Allowing the talk to fade away. Noticing the quality of the mind and the heart. The energies may be ruffled a bit by the talk, all the information, and as we think about our own gains and losses and pleasures and pains and fames and insignificance and praises and blames, can rattle up some uncomfortable or pleasant feelings. All of that's just fine. Bring equanimity to it. An acceptance and a stability, a flexible stability of mind. So when the winds blow, like a strong, flexible sapling, the mind can bend one way and bend the other, but it comes back to a graceful middle point, unperturbed. A poem by Rumi. The title is The Guest House. The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Dedication of the merit. By the merit of this strengthening activity, may there be a cessation of all the defilements, leaving in its place the 7 factors of awakening. Idang te punyakamon asawakyawang ho tu, idang te punyakamon asawakyawang ho tu, idang te punyakamon asawakyawang ho tu, sabisita sakita hong tu. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering, and may all beings dwell in perfect equanimity, impartial and loving toward all.